Hey everyone, Jamie here from TechnicalCafe.com, and in this tutorial, we're going to be talking about arrays in PHP, and how we can go about using them to add some more efficiency to our code, as well as how we can use them to add additional features as well. So, what exactly is an array? An array is basically just a way to store multiple values within the same variable, and this can come in handy if you're using similar values, like a list of names or things like that. So let's take a look at an example here. Let's say what we want to do is create an array to hold a list of names. What we could do without using an array would just be to create some individual variables, like name1 equals John, or we could say name2 equals Sharon, and name3 equals Linda, and we could just keep going on until we reach the number of names that we have. And while this might work for some cases, searching through this list or trying to organize it or whatever can be a little bit inefficient, especially if we have a large data set that we're working with. So one way to help kind of mitigate this would be to use an array. So we can store all of these names and more in one single variable and access them easily. So let's go ahead and create an array. So what we're going to do is say names, and what we're going to do is set this equal to the array construct within the PHP language. So that's going to look like this. Array, and then it's going to have a set of parentheses there, and then we're just going to close off that statement. So we have names equals array. And within this set of parentheses here, what we're going to do is include all of the names that we'd like to store within our array. And these names are going to be stored in what are called indices, so essentially indexes that hold these names. So let's go ahead and create our list. Let's say John, we'll say Sharon, we'll say Linda, Mike, and then we'll finish it off with Bruce. So this is our array here that holds 5 names. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And these 5 names are stored in what are called indices. So starting with 0, we have John, Sharon is 1, Linda is 2, Mike is 3, and Bruce is 4. And now that we have this array, we can go ahead and learn how to access the different names that are stored within it. So given that everything is stored in what's called an index, we can just come over here and actually, similar to how we would echo out a regular variable value, we could do the same thing with an array. So let's say echo, and then what we can do is say names, and then to access the specific index that's the value that we want is stored in, we can just use a set of square brackets, and we can just put in the number of the index. So because the indices start with 0, let's say we want to access John. So if we say echo names 0, and then close off that statement there, we can save this and jump over to Google Chrome and refresh, and you'll notice that we have John. If we jump back into our text editor and say we want to echo out Linda, so we know that Linda is the third element in the array, so we can say 0, 1, 2, and that'll give us Linda once we echo this out. So if we jump back over to Chrome and refresh, you'll notice that we have Linda. So this is great. We learned how to create an array, and we learned how to echo out the values in an array. But let's talk about another way that we can go ahead and create an array. And we can do this without actually using the array construct. So let's go ahead and just delete this here, and so we can say names equals, and then we can go ahead and just use the quote-unquote short syntax to define this array as well. So we can say names equals, and then just like we did above in our previous example, we can say the names. So John, Sharon, Linda, Mike, and Bruce. And this will give us the same exact thing that we had using our array construct. So if we wanted to echo out Linda, we just go 0, 1, 2 to the third index, and we're just going to echo out index 2. And if we come over here and refresh, you'll notice that we get Linda. So these are just 2 ways that we can go about setting up an array. They both will have the same results once you set them up. Let's say, however, we wanted to echo out all of the values that are in this array. And we could do something like this. So we could say echo out 0, and we could say echo out names 1, and then echo out names 2 and 3 and 4, and so on and so forth. And while this is a good way to echo out, a couple of values, if we have an array that has, let's say, 100 or 200 values, we're not going to want to do this because it's going to be pretty inefficient. So what we can do in this situation would be to use a for loop to echo out the values of the array. In this example, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 values. So let's go ahead and write a for loop to echo out those 5 values. So we can say for, and we'll set I equal to 0, because we're going to start with echoing out our first index, which starts at 0. And we're going to say I is less than or equal to 4, because we're going to stop at index, the 5th index, which is technically index 4, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're just going to add 1 to each for each pass through this this loop. So let's go ahead and open up our code block, and we're just going to say echo names. And instead of putting in the individual index number, what we're going to do is just throw in the variable here that the loop is currently on. So we're going to add in I. So let's go ahead and save this and jump over to Chrome and refresh. And you'll notice that we have all of our names here. We don't have any spaces between them, so let's go ahead and add those in. So what we can do is just also echo out a line break. And then if we come back over to Chrome and refresh, you'll notice that we have our 5 names here. There is a function that you can use called the size of function with an array. So let's say we had an array that had like 127 values, but we didn't want to count all of those values. We could use what's called the size of function. So we could say size of, and we could put our array in here, names, and then what we're going to do is just save this and refresh. And you'll notice that we get our names, but we also get an error here, and this is because the size of function tells us how many indexes or indices are within the array. So there are 5 indices in this array, but it starts at 0. So this is going to give us 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And because we stopped with the array at index 4, we're going to go out of bounds of the array because this is stopping our loop at index 5 because the array has 5 items in it. So all we got to do to kind of counteract that is just subtract 1. And now this is going to say for I equals 0, for I is less than or equal to 5 minus 1, so 4. Just keep going here. And then what we're going to do is go from 0 to 4 here. So if we save this and jump over here and refresh, you'll notice we get our names and no error. So that's just basically how you would work with indexed arrays in PHP. One thing to note is that you don't actually have to define or declare however many indices you'd like when you first set up your array like you would in a language like Java or C or something like that. So feel free to play around with arrays. They can come in handy when you're searching or sorting data, and as well as just adding some efficiency when you're working with similar variables. So feel free to leave any questions in the comments section below, and thank you for watching.